I'm here with Albert, the last ever general manager to win the Overwatch League. Um, as I understand, currently, unfortunately, still looking for work and
Yeah.
in a challenging market. And I thought we would start there in terms of discussing the general esports
Yeah.
temperature, because I feel like just and it makes a lot of sense that it is this way, but the general temperature, especially amidst all these layoffs right now, is one of pessimism. And not just pessimism for the short term, but for the general viability of esports as an industry. So, do you think this is deserved pessimism? Do you think esports can succeed eventually? Where do you generally land on this?
I mean, I think it's a classic like esports circle of life cycle. Um, I think it's cyclical. Like this has happened before where I mean, before my time, right? I think I came in at on the back of like another round of like, oh, we need a ton of VC funding because we have this new concept like, oh, we can franchise esports came up and then all the VC money started pouring in. So I that's when I got into esports. But before that there was I mean, it's been tried in the past. Like I think with CS they had God, what was that league that like flopped? It was like it
CGS.
was CGS. Yes, they had CGS where it was like Source. It was like fighting games. It was like on Direct TV. Like we've been through this before. Like this is nothing new. It's just like okay, a lot of hype got built in. So CGS was like had a lot of, and then it was like okay, so the product, the viewership wasn't, it was like okay, well we're not there yet, and so then people were like a lot of VC firms started reassessing, like oh, like well like doesn't seem like we're there yet, and then like this new wave happened where it's like oh we can franchise, and then all these I think sports has gone through a period where it's like sky high valuations, and it's like okay if if you're like okay let's also franchise esports and then we can maybe get to that level, right? Like was the thinking, and then all the sports owners were like, "Oh yeah, like this is great. Like my sports team like valuations going through the roof. Like what it'd be great if like I can get an esport right at a much lower price, and like that valuation goes up, right? So and then after the franchise system, kind of like there's some serious flaws with it, and there's the Overwatch League dying, and then now we're entering like a new period where like okay, so maybe team like city based franchising isn't the play. What's the I think smarter people than me, people with more power than me are gonna be working on a new model um that'll be attractive. But I think as time goes on, we will approach esports like viability as like as a sport, right? As international or as like a worldwide like I mean it's already a worldwide like pastime, right? Like video games where I think in the past like when I was growing up it was like largely stigmatized, and now it's like every sports uh every professional athlete also plays video games in their downtime. Like that's just how people spend their free time nowadays, whether it's mobile games or console or whatever. Um so I think the base is there. It just like as they age, I think a big problem was it's hard to monetize a lot of your fan base when they're young because they have no money to spend. So yeah, I think we'll figure it out. I think it's just in one of those downturn like years. I don't know how long it's gonna last. But for sure, I full confidence we're gonna pick back up eventually. Just can't tell you when that's gonna be, but I think it's inevitable that that there's always gonna be a place for esports.
Not sure how much you will be able to say on this, but it feels like this demographic that we're appealing to, yes, they might have less recreational income, but it also feels like that in the creator economy, there's plenty of money to be made, and they are also
Mm,
readily okay to, give a Twitch sub or whatever. It's presumably not just all primes, it's also their hard-earned money, or I
yeah.
guess from their parents. And there is money in that particular group. It's just that esports is currently doesn't have the tools to extract it. Do you think there's anything to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easier to monetize your fan base as an individual um than it is as an organization. I think there's just as the individual, like, okay, I'm supporting this person, and then that person, it's more clear like who you're supporting and like the product. It's more personal, right? Whereas supporting org is a little different. It's not as personal. Like, I mean, I think you look at like sports teams, right? Like, yeah, you might buy some sports merch, you might buy some sports tickets, right? But like, if you're a real fan of like a band or like something a little bit more intimate, you're probably gonna end up spending more money, on that individual than on like your sports teams, for example. Um, I mean, tickets are expensive, so that's a little different. But I'm just saying, like in general, I think it's easier to be like, oh, like I support, like Super, for example. Like, oh, like I watch them all the time. Like that's like a constant, right? Whereas I think for orgs, it's like the players always change, right? There's not always like they follow creators, not orgs. So, like when creators sign to orgs, I don't think a lot of them are like, oh, like I'm like a diehard 100 Thieves fan, or like I'm a diehard like Misfits fan. It's like, oh, I'm still a fan of like Rambo. I'm still a fan of like Valkyrie, and first, and then I'll support them as long as I'll support 100 Thieves or Misfits as long as they're with that org. But then you know, once that link disappears, then I'm still I'm here because of that person, not because of the org. Um, so yeah, that's what I think.
I feel like your old employer is probably one of the ones that had the smoothest exit from esports of those endemic esports organizations that then went into wider content creation. Was that something that could be felt? Do you think like there was also like this creator bend in terms of like how you guys wanted to market and everything?
I think it was like I think our leadership just looked at esports and was like, okay, like operationally. I mean, I would say every org's breaking even at best, maybe a little profit, but like most of them are losing a ton of money operationally every year, on their esports teams. And then it was just sustained by like VC money, or I mean, not just VC, investor money in general. It doesn't have to be VC, but it was like, okay, as long as you can secure another round of funding, you can fund. You have this long of a runway, right? And then once the money started drying up, then I was like, okay, like we have to be sustainable ourselves. And then it was like, okay, well, for our LEC team, it was like, we can't, we're losing money every year. We're not, that good, but the slot was valued at like a decent amount, and we got a decent offer before. I think LEC is having, like, I think we exit at the top of the market in terms of valuations, for LEC slots. So yeah, we got a lot of money from that, from the sale of that team, which we decided, like our leadership decided to, okay, instead of re-injecting it back into esports where we've been losing money, like let's try to inject that into, creators and, trying to figure out, if we can monetize that better and see better returns, um, which I think is reasonable. It kind of sucks, but yeah. And then Overwatch League, obviously, once we got uh, our refund from, once the league dissolved and we got, a little bit of a refund, on our buy-ins. We just leadership decided to close down esports entirely, and so we only have the COD team. But I think all our exits have been, at least for we've gotten a size, either a partial refund on all the fees, or like we made a profit on the sale, um, getting out of our franchise league. So they're just in one franchise league now, which is COD.
Right. So before the podcast, we talked a little bit about the power of memes. Okay. And I feel like the memes aren't just the funny haha thing, but any like linguistic unit that just sticks to people and they use it as like a tool to interpret the world through in some way, right? And one thing that I found to be weird at best, well manufactured and propagandized at worst, is that somehow the players are to blame for esports winter. That were all greedy and they like demanded the money and the organizational overhead. And I'm not even 100% sure if that's what org owners were saying. They just said like our overhead is too large and the salaries are too high. The thing is the culprit really the player that's asking for market price, or is it the one guy that escalates the entire, or I guess it's not just one, but several guys that escalate the market prices that then force everything up?
I mean, it just takes one GM, one president, one CEO to be like, yeah, I'll pay this I'll pay this above market price, and then that sets the market price for everyone else. I don't certainly blame the agents for asking like, oh, I heard, obviously the player agent's job is to juice up the offer as much as they can. That's literally their job. So like I don't feel like you can blame them for trying to get the most, or like, hey, you're not thinking about like the greater industry. Like, come on, like let's be like they're incentivized to get max, like whatever the max value of the contract is, that's what they're incentivized to get. That's literally their job. And if I had an agent, I want them to do the same way. Like fuck the industry as a whole. Like if I can get $1 million right now, like you getting me, like
Yeah.
like however we can get that, like let's do that, right? So I think it's wrong to look, because I think some people are like, oh, like some people are blaming agents, like, oh, you guys are like asking like ridiculous amounts. It's like, well, for them to be asking ridiculous amounts and you considering that, that means somebody said yes. Like somebody, like one of these decision makers was like, yeah, that sounds reasonable to spend 500K on an Overwatch League player. And then now everyone else like, well, XYZ got this like 250, like a 250K salary, 250K buyout, like that's that's the market, right? Like my player's better than that, or like my player's slightly worse than that, but like that's 250. Like we like let's like that sets the market, right? It takes one person. It takes one person to say yes, or like to just be lazy and like not and like fold and just give in, and then the dominoes just fall, right? Then the market price gets set. Because I don't know how many times, at least in Overwatch League, where it's like, oh, like this year, like all the own, like I hear from Ben, like, oh yeah, the owners are saying, like a lot of owners are saying they're going to spend less this year, and I'm like, Ben, this is like the most I've ever seen anybody spend, actually. Like, like this is the most this team's ever spent. Like, what are you talking about? They were going budget this year. So there's been situations like that where it's just like, okay, owners change their mind. So I don't know what happens. Like maybe the GM's a bad negotiator, or whatever, and then yeah, I think it's just a domino effect, right? Like once that first domino falls, the market price is set, and then it's over. I think it's really, it would take like a, but I mean, on the opposite side, you can't really just collude. You can't just be like, hey,
Right.
you talk to every GM in the league, be like, hey, we will not be paying anything over like 100K. You can't do that either. So it's like, it's kind of like you as an individual have to understand, like, and all these orgs are different. Like some people just got fresh money, so it's like we're just looking to win, right? Like some orgs are probably like, okay, you have a ridiculous budget, like, but the goal is to win. So it's like we're okay with this as long as we win. That's what we want, right? Or like it's all relative, right? Because like if you're like Cronky's, like initially, like it's even if you have like a massive esports like payroll, that's like a drop in the bucket compared to your professional sports team, right? So it's like it's all relative.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think happens. I think it just takes one or two people to be like, yeah, we're gonna set, and then that's the market price, and then the whole rest of that esport is screwed, and then compound that by however many esports there are. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels just like incentives are misaligned. Everyone's really doing the best they can within reason. I don't think there was too much overstepping, at least in Overwatch, and I think also Overwatch probably had less of an issue in terms of ridiculous salaries in comparison to other esports.
Yeah.
But do you think there could have been rules? Let's say, I'm not sure how familiar you are with European soccer, but something like financial fair play rules. Even though financial fair play rules are much more, against outside intervention, or, but also more recently, keeping teams from overspending and.
Can you explain that? I'm unfamiliar. I'm only familiar with the U.S. sports, which just have salary caps, and like non-tampering and certain like
Right.
like basically it incentivizes you to stay with or at least in the NBA, it incentivizes you to stay with your team because you can get paid the most on your team, and if you keep switching teams, you can't get paid as much if you just keep jumping teams.
Right. So I know people in the comments will be saying, "Oh, that's very reductive," but the
Yeah.
short of it is, you can only spend within your means, and there's a certain limit with which you can do it. That is beholden to your sponsorship income, so to speak, as percentage. I think there's a weird formula.
Okay, so it's basically like, hey, this is how much you're taking in, therefore you can only spend this much because okay, so but
For
it's based on
simplicity's sake, yes.
it's based on the financial health of
Yes.
the business, not like the pockets of the owners.
Correct.
Okay. Because in the NBA, like there's a salary cap, but you can also spend in like luxury. There's like a luxury tax that you can like.
Right.
If you're just like a bazillionaire owner and you're like, yeah, I just want everyone like you could go above it. It's just you'd have to pay like a hefty tax. But I think most owners don't really want to spend. Like I think it's very rare to have that much luxury tax nowadays. But okay, that's interesting. I mean, so for if you did that for esports, it would really just it's really just your sales team. Like however good your sales team is, that's how that would dictate how many teams you have or how many teams you could field.
Right.
Because that's unfortunate. That's like the only real like revenue lever that esports teams have is like sponsorship money. I think merch is like barely makes a dent in anything. I mean, you don't really make that much profit off merch. Yeah, it would just be pure sponsorship revenue. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, like Overwatch League tried something similar. I know it's a touchy subject, especially with the investigation that went in. But do you think the idea per se was bad? If there had been more insight into the financials and players were actually, going to see the fruits of their labor in some way, maybe you even make a push to or for them to organize to get it above bar, for them to have a legal entity represented them, or do you think that was always a stupid idea?
You talking about like a players union?
The players,
Or
rather the soft salary cap like the NBA has, right?
oh, okay. See, at the same, I think it's just like I don't think it should be like enforced in like by the letter of the law or anything like that. But I think it's just more of like a mindset, and I think towards like I think last year was great. Like I don't think spending was very sustainable. I would say across the league. I think the biggest reason why Owl didn't continue is I don't think the plan that was proposed by Blizzard that they owed to the owners was not like a reasonable enough plan for owners to be like, okay, like we see this, like it was basically like if the plan wasn't good enough for them not to just take the money, take the refund and be like, okay, yeah, we had one good year like where the salaries weren't crazy and like we everything was like pretty reasonable, but I think for a lot of orgs they were all hurting because it's esports winter, and so there was like, okay, we need that, we'd rather take the millions that have some of the millions back than keep going. But I think it's more like just it's just you just need like better actors in the space. Because I don't want to limit like if a team or if an org like they have different, they found a way to pay their players more and like still be sustainable. I don't think that's a big problem. I think it's just like when everyone is like, I think the biggest problem is like FOMO. It's like, oh, well now it's like they're like, oh, you paid proper, like let's say you paid proper this year like 200K, which would be ridiculous in a down year like this, but let's say someone paid proper 200K and all of a sudden like, oh, all these tier 1 orgs that are like rumored to be coming in, it's like, oh, well then everyone has to pay 100K at least to get similar caliber, and then you just have an inflation, right? I think it's just being. I don't think it's necessarily bad to pay. Like I want Proper to get that 200K, right? I think he's the best flex DPS in the world. Like I get 200K from someone, take it, right? I just wish it didn't come at the expense of greater, like the greater health of the esport, which I think is what I think some of it came down to. And then, but I just don't think it's fair to be like, hey, you can't do this because, like no, everyone's just very stringently like, blocked from doing certain things. I don't like any regulation like that.
I feel like a lot of Overwatch League teams right-sized to the threshold where they weren't either losing a lot of money or just a little bit. I'm not sure how that looks with everything combined, but at least on their roster spending. A discussion that's rarely had is, do you expect that Blizzard was heavily losing money on hosting the league?
I don't know. I mean, at the first 2 years they made a killing, no? Like publicly, like it was reported that they like first year they knocked it out of the park for sure. And then second year, I think they also did very well. And I think then people started complaining because I don't think the owners were seeing like, okay, like the league did great. Where's our cut? Where's our cut? Because we're operating the league, like, or where's our cut of this profit that we're seeing posted like all over the internet, like, oh yeah, Blizzard made like millions, on top of, so they got the league fees, and then on top of that, they're making a profit on the broadcast and selling the league and sponsors and everything. And I think that's where like the disillusion set in, where it's like, okay, we're spending ridiculous amount of money because it's a franchise league. We want to put our best foot forward. We want to, we want to foster a good environment, a healthy esport. And part of that is like players get paid. Like players get paid well, and that incentivizes the whole ecosystem to strive to be, to become pro players. Like that expands like your pool of players, your esports fandom, and yeah. So I think I don't know. I don't know about after like COVID on. I don't know what the league looked like. Like I have no like. I don't think there's any reporting on like profits made like there were in the first two seasons. So I mean, if there were profits, like
Only the YouTube deal, yeah, right?
yeah, it couldn't. Yeah, it was just that was just revenue, right?
Yes.
But that doesn't necessarily mean they made a profit on it.
Right.
But I know they were cutting costs internally as well. Like they were outsourcing certain things, production wise, like less lands. So I don't know. I know they definitely had a lot of pressure to not lose money. Because from what I understand, Overwatch League was run as a business unit rather than as like a marketing expense. Um, because that's kind of how Riot structures it. It's like, okay, they view esports as an integral part of marketing for their base game. And so they're fully integrated, whereas like Team 4 and Overwatch League were separate like units.
Yes.
They weren't like Team Al wasn't like under Team 4, as like a subdivision or whatever. It was like they were two separate like things, and like they had to coordinate between themselves to get like skins or like tokens, stuff like that. Whereas I feel like for Riot it seems much more seamless and like much more like, okay, you're talking, something for esports also has like a direct through line to the devs behind the base game.
Yeah, to me it seemed like they spent astronomically on marketing season 1. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I think the Blizzard Arena must have not been cheap. All the
That's
rates
true.
for
Yeah.
production and everything was also pretty high. And I think they were just fine taking that until they could pawn that off onto the teams by them having
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
homestands, right? And then as that cost fell onto them once more, that's when uh, like the cuts kept happening, and that then relate. I think if I'm not mistaken, the last time we heard anything about financials overall, even like player salaries and everything, was season 3, and after that,
Yeah.
or start of the season 3.
Well, and then the Blizzard controversies happened, and then the league lost all their sponsors.
Right.
Um, so then the sponsor money dried up for the league, and then yeah, then COVID happened, and then I think it just all or COVID happened, and then the Blizzard controversy. I don't remember the order of events anymore, but yeah, those two big events happened, and then yeah, it was kind of downhill from there.
I'd argue there was another thing that happened. Did you know that your tweet asking for the best esports related tweets was on competitive Valorant today?
I heard someone was like, why am I browsing this and your tweets on Valorant? Yeah, I haven't looked at that though, but yeah, it makes sense. There's a lot of good Valorant tweets. Why?
Why it feels like whenever I read Valorant and there's either like an Overwatch player popping up or any talent, the Uber announcement, whenever
Yeah,
it's Brandon's sideshow, even like the wider cycle there seems to be a large overlap. Like Valorant just siphoned off a bunch of Overwatch fans, at least the vocal
yeah.
minority, and made them their own. Do you think that's feasible, or is it just like an overrepresentation? Or did Overwatch actually lose a lot of viewership to Valorant?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard because Valorant's been open. on like they're not exclusive. I think you can't really make it apples to it's like apples to oranges because we're YouTube exclusive and we're in like YouTube's like hell for discoverability compared to Twitch. Like Twitch, you can have the same broadcast, the same problems, and the viewership will be like 3x, 4x maybe. Like so, like I don't really see it as a fair, it's just conjecture. But I do think Valorant is the more I think it was definitely the more attractive like esport. Like if you liked the gameplay, if you like, I don't think it's a substitute for Overwatch. But if you wanted like this blend of like tac FPS but faster paced with abilities that it's not an Overwatch replacement at all, but it's like it's something that I mean it's a good esport. I think I think it's a great esport. It's easier to it might I think it's easier to watch than Overwatch in many ways, but also much harder to watch than like CS, because CS is more static and like yeah. So, but Overwatch also the art style is kind of not quite Overwatch level, but also not like realistic like CS. So like I think it's just like a nice like middle ground. There's a little something for everyone, and I think a lot of I think a lot of I don't know if anyone dropped Overwatch completely and moved to Valorant, but I'm sure a lot of people like both, for sure. And then there's a lot of like Avast was doing Valorant. Like there's a lot of personalities that over like very very big, like Brand Sideshow, very very big Overwatch personalities that were doing Valorant, and I'm sure people followed them there as well. I mean Golden Boy, right? Like just a lot of Overwatch talent. Uber, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like in some ways Overwatch lost its meme industrial complex to Valorant in some ways, right? And then also Mr. X moved up into a less like more
Yeah.
production role, and
We can talk. I mean, I also think the problem with the at least from a Western side of like because we're
right.
Western, like so we have a Western view on like memes, right? Like I don't know what's going on the Kakao forums, like
Yes. Yeah,
or
fair.
Invent, like they might have been memeing it up for years. Like I would
Yeah.
never know,
Yeah.
right? But I think it sucks from the meme standpoint that our league was so dominated by Koreans, that don't most of them didn't speak English very well, and I think Valorant is more since there's region locks and then there's regional teams and then there's a lot more room for like personalities that it's not like imagine if Valorant was just a bunch of DRX players essentially or like a bunch of teams that look like DRX because that's really what Overwatch League became. It's like a bunch of like you need to have at least one or two Koreans on your team to be relevant, right? Or to be any good. If you had no Koreans on your team, like you were just gonna be a bad team more than likely. Um, so I think Valorant benefits from having regions, and having a very healthy ecosystem at the moment, and having a lot of player interest and talent, and like I think a lot of them stream, and I think that's a very very big thing. Like you have very vocal personalities that stream that are pros, like Shazam, and and I think the way like you look at a Valorant stream, and I feel like a lot of them feel very similar. Like go to a Subroza stream, you go to like a Shank stream, you go to a Prod stream, you go to like any of the big Valorant creators, it feels very like homogenous almost. Like they're different people, but like it feels
Right.
the same. Like the culture is very like homogenous, I feel, at like the Valorant like pro, like high ranked, high elo level. And so I think the memes are then it's easy to disseminate because you talk, Tarek's are the same, like like Tarek's in the same circles as all the other ranked players, and like whatever's popular there, like gets thrown on the subreddit, and then like drama gets, and then they all feed off the drama, they all have a take on the drama, and then it's like, you get a very like homogenous like ecosystem for Valorant. Whereas I think for Overwatch, it's like, oh, you need like someone from China that like can translate some Chinese memes, some Chinese drama, bring it to the comp Overwatch Reddit, some Korean American that can like translate, oh, this is what happened in like Proper's Discord that he's complaining about, like throws it on the Reddit. Where it's just like there's a lot, the dissemination of like drama and like memes is just it was harder in Overwatch than it was for Valorant.
There's I hope I recall this correctly, but there's a thing called the thermocline effect, and basically, it's not that consumers or generally things just break together as they reach the point where it's no longer of value to them, right?
Mhm.
What actually happens is people are sort of lazy to change, so they
Right.
keep up with changes, they keep up, and then eventually it might just be like a little thing that kicks them off. But even if you put it back, those guys will not be coming back, right? Like it might be, and in part, for instance, like folks expected this for Twitter to happen. Like one feature, even if they were to revert it, people would just be fed up and they would never come back to the platform. It would escalate and the thing would be dead, right? Was there a thing that you could pinpoint where you felt maybe the optimism of early days, like where the it slowly set in, and then maybe what was the breaking point where you realized, okay, this is probably going to be the last season?
Well, I think this season was the first, because like every other season, I was like, okay, we got one more year, and this season, I was like, there was an actual vote, and I was like,
Right.
knowing that there's a vote that could decide the league, and it's in the owner's hands. Like, I don't, I was like, I already know most of the ownership had big issues with Blizzard and like wanted to get out. Or like, I wanted like, so initially, I think their ask was like franchise fees refunded. I think if Blizzard refunded the franchise fees like a year ago and was like, okay, like we're switching to like a VALORANT model where you're a franchise, but you don't have to pay franchise fees. Like we're gonna forget. They were already frozen for years, so the owners really just wanted their money back. Like, hey, like, like we refuse to pay more. Can you give us the money back? Seeing as because the Overwatch League the premise that Overwatch League was built on failed. It was a city-based model with homestands, and that was the model. Once homestands failed and nobody wanted to do homestands anymore, it was like, I mean, not nobody wanted to do homestands, but like the original model was so far away from like what was actually going to be viable that yeah, it was a failure. And it's like, yeah, some teams wanted to do homestands, but it's like, so you just have to send everyone to Dallas or you send everyone to DC. It's like, who, like, should they get the cut? Like there's probably like less events. I think like city-based events, like similar to like majors, I think made sense for Overwatch. I don't think the homestand model made any sense. Just for esports in general, like we're not there yet. Like spending that much money flying, like we're not the NBA, like we're not the NFL, like
No.
we're not soccer, right? Like
Yeah.
why are we? It's just ridiculous to spend that much money to fly around and play games that you can do online. For example, like online qualifiers into LAN events, right? So yeah, I think that was the beginning and the end, and I think this season, once I learned, like I was like, okay, knowing that it's esports, like we're in the middle of esports winter, Overwatch League is in, it's like the owners had I forgot that like arbitration, right? They entered into like an arbitration with some lawyers, like they were talking to Blizzard and trying to get
Hmm.
uh their opinions and their wants heard legally, and then they had the vote. And so I think, and I told my players that I think after like the rumors, like I obviously I had to, as part of my job, I knew a little bit more, but once the leak came out, and then I told all my players, I was like, yeah, like very, like if I was smart, like if you were smart, like you would start preparing, like mentally at least, like this could be the last season, like try to figure out like what do you guys want to do. And I was like, but nothing changes, right? Like we're gonna finish the season. Just understand that this could be your only chance to ever win. This could be the last AL championship or AL grand finals ever. And so, um, you know, might as well win it, since not worry. Like let's worry about winning it, and then just figure the rest out after. But yeah.
Yeah. I guess this is where where we transition as the Overwatch League transitioned. I always liked how they phrased that in the official statement, that the Overwatch League has transitioned into a new competitive model.
Yeah.
and it's now the Overwatch Championship Series.
Yep.
And I feel like a lot of folks around Overwatch Esports generally are not too enthusiastic. I remember Grant having a tweet about it, being like, okay, this is not something that is economically viable for anyone to participate in realistically from an org side. Just as is, right? The Overwatch Championship Series as is. What were your general impressions of, the economic viability, the competitive format? What were you thinking when you saw it?
Just OWCS, I feel like from my standpoint, it should be like a wait and see. Like good that I think it's like a transitionary product, like a initial like pilot program for whatever the new thing is. I made a list of things that like realistically like could expect, like, okay, the crowdfunding part, right? Um, there's some things they can do there to make it better. But I think without like very, very clear org incentives, why why invest money into it? I think it's good for players. I think it's good for because it allows the players, like, it's not just a completely dead year, right? Which could have easily happened. They'd be like, okay, well, 2024, like nothing on the calendar because like Owl just died. I think that would have been terrible. Like we could be much worse. But I think just keeping in mind it's like a first year, they probably had like 2-3 months to roll this out or to plan this entire thing after Owl, after the Owl vote. So, yeah, I think it's fine on short notice. I think it's good for players, that they can earn money and that there's something to play for. But as an overall, like this can't, there needs to be improvements made to the structure, to, if they really, like, because I think everyone was like, oh, Overwatch is back. It's like, well, it's not back. Like it's back and like it's not dead, but like it's not back. Like I don't know what. When I hear something's back, I'm like, oh, like, this is gonna be big. It's gonna be better than ever. It's like, no, it's not there yet. It's something. It's something in the interim, and I think it's a. And I said this when Owl like died. I was like, I think whatever format they come up with, it's gonna be like a dead year. Like, or I mean, it's gonna be an off year. It's gonna be a year where it's like people, like, okay, this is the open system's back. Everyone's probably like in a holding pattern, seeing if it pops off, and then if it does well, then great, like we're back. But I think a lot hinges on, like, I mean, this is a true test. Like, do people still care about watching Overwatch Esports, right? Assuming it's open, like, do people care when it's not Owl? I mean, I think Owl like was already like the trajectory was down in terms of viewership anyway. But now it's like, okay, now we're opening it up to everyone. Do people care? I think the format's just harder for people to care about because there's no team. Like, who are you rooting for? You don't even know if you're the general public, you don't even know who the teams are.
Right.
There's like 2 or 3 teams that are announced, and it's like, okay, what is there to be? You can't be excited for anything when there's nothing to attach your excitement to. There's no orgs. I mean, there's one org, right, officially announced, but like, it's like, okay, you don't know what orgs they're gonna be. You don't know what the rosters look like. I think many people don't even know like all the different like OWL tournaments. Yeah, I'm not OWL tournaments, Overwatch tournaments, right? Like, there's the Esports World Cup and there's the Saudi E League, which are 2 separate, but they're in the same. They're all run by the Saudis. And then there's the OWCS, which is like, from like a money making perspective, might be one of the, at least at the outset, one of the not as prestigious competitions, at least compared to the Esports World Cup. Probably make more than Saudi E League. I don't know about salary, but at least prize pool, I feel like OWCS should be more. But yeah, it's just kind of in a weird. There's a lack. There's like a fog. There's like a fog of war over like the new ecosystem. So like until all those, like, until the clear picture emerges, I think it's kind of hard to say like it's back.
I feel like, is there a price breakpoint where the Esports World Cup, with rules that might just not be the same as Overwatch Championship Series and whatnot, maybe no region lock, maybe a different, competitive system, maybe they have hero bans or whatever, who knows, right? Is there a point where their prize money is so high that it effectively becomes the de facto, competition that everyone cares about, similarly to TI and Dota, where the Overwatch Championship Series is just an afterthought?
I think. I mean, yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, I don't know with the Esports World Cup. Is that something? Did they say what cycle it's? Is it yearly? Is it like the Olympics where it's like or is it every 2 years? Is it every 4 years? Like, or is it every year?
I think it's annual, yeah.
Annual? Okay. And with that cadence, it's kind of like it kind of gets more tough. And then it's like then the question is what happens to Overwatch World Cup as a program?
Right. Even though, like, I think I
Those two
agree,
communities. Yeah.
but they're not the same, right? Like in
They're not
terms of how.
Yeah. But I'm saying in terms of like an international like competition, but yeah, it's not completely the same, but it's oh, I don't know. I think ideally you would I mean, you're Blizzard, right? Like you have Esports World Cup still has to apply for a license to run the tournament.
Right.
So I feel like Blizzard still has leverage, and if I was Blizzard, I would use that leverage to somehow integrate Esports World that whatever the Overwatch competition is into the OWCS ecosystem as like, because I think that's the way to that like similar to like I guess CS also has like one-off tournaments, right? Like that don't count as majors or anything. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be nice if you could field if it operated off the same rules. Like, okay, you have to choose a region you're from, and then you can have like X number of imports. I think if the rules were the same, it'd be nicer without having to. You don't necessarily have to combine or integrate it into OWCS, but at least it would give teams more of like, okay, I can field a team that's I can more easily field a team that's viable. That's also the most optimal I can field for the Esports World Cup and is OWCS legal, right? And I think that having the rule set or at least the roster construction being the same, I think would be a really important sticking point. Otherwise, it's like Esports World Cup. It's like okay, what's stopping like a big org like G2 from getting like Team Hamster, right? And that being their team for Esports World Cup. But then that team has two different practice schedules because those players also, may not be on the same org for OWCS or they're on separate. Like, yeah, just really depends. That's a bad example because that team would be legal for OWCS too. But
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Depending on the region it plays in, yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a gut feeling how this will go if the Esports World Cup will actually announce that Overwatch is part of it? How do you perceive this community to react to this?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, ESL Facet's already owned by the Saudis, so this is just another.
Right, but that level of shroud might just be enough.
I mean, the question is that as a viewer you have to ask yourself is, would you rather not watch Overwatch at all? Because like that's really what it is. Would you rather watch zero Overwatch Esports, or would you rather watch it knowing that it's being hosted by, a country that maybe you don't agree with ideologically, or, you don't find culturally appealing. Like that's. I mean, I can't make that decision for the viewer. Like I don't know. My gut feeling, I feel like people will watch Overwatch, because there is no other venue, or there is no other avenue to watch Overwatch Esports besides watching something that's run or owned by or operated by like the Saudis or Saudi owned. Yeah, I think that's just the reality of the situation we're in. And I don't even think it's not really an alternative either. Because face it, ESL, like they're like the premier like tournament, like running like TO organization. And they have like a platform and like an online platform, and everything, and face it integration. And yeah, I mean, I don't even think there's much argument.
I think the argument would be that
Blizzard takes the cost.
I mean, Blizzard also does not currently host an event in Riyadh, right? Where when the issue being the sports washing aspect, you could argue that it's less feasible if there is no connection to Saudi Arabia. What kind of image or marketing benefit are you generating for them?
Yeah.
But eventually it would be there because DreamHack is going to host events there, right?
I mean, the reality is Saudis are the only ones spending any significant money in esports right now. Like they're spending an obscene amount of money, and esports is not like I think people have talked this point on the ground. Like esports has not been a healthy product like financially for the entirety of its existence. And so, unfortunately, that means you have to take the money like where you can find it. Like I think before it was like the crypto stuff, right? Like NFTs. Like there's a reason why like teams had felt the need to take those, those deals, and because it was just a ridiculous amount of money, right? And they needed that to keep their business running. And I think that's where we're at, like in terms of for esports, at least for Overwatch is. I mean, it's not even just for Overwatch. They're trying to operate. They're operating like multiple games, right? Many games, like League of Legends included, at the Esports World Cup. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just the reality situation. I can't make the decisions for. That's like just the individual choice, Like, do you want to watch Overwatch Esports anymore? Because that's the point we're at.
For sure, yeah. Now, the other part I was interested in Overwatch CS is because you're the resident, rule abuser to a degree, where
Yeah.
you will be the one to look at the rules and find loopholes, and then maybe exploit them to a degree in order to get a competitive advantage. Now they did something, in my opinion, smart, which is to put them public, and then to have everyone be able to look at it, spot early issues, and then give feedback, right?
Yeah.
As I perceive them, I think they're also much more refined than they were, especially in Season 6, where there were a ton of inconsistencies. And I just assume there's not going to be a second version of rulebook going to pop up that completely disagrees with, there's some level of consistency. But so far, there seem to be limited amounts of, ways to exploit it. And even the thing that you said in terms of like resident, non-resident, what constitutes that, seems pretty well covered, right? Like, how do you think of the rule set that they gave?
Oh yeah. I did it when I streamed. I read the rules. I did a stream. I went through the announcement, read through the rules, and tried to like figure out like what there was to explain. I think they did a very good job of the rule set. Seems pretty straightforward. Like, circuit points are awarded to players. There's a cap. Like you can't just team hop and bring like your circuit points with you. It's whatever you're capped at, whatever the circuit points your current team earned before. So you can't be like, oh, I'm a 50-point circuit. I have 50 circuit points because I won first place with another team. I team hopped to second place team. They won it again, and you can't mess around with. You're just capped at whatever your team's like points were from the last split, unless you move teams. So I think they did. It seems like they put a lot of thought into the point systems. Like you can't just roster ride and get points. You have to play. You have to play to get points. So you can't just like be like a 6-man, 7th-man, 8th-man, hop onto another roster, juice up their circuit points. Only the starters really count. So I think they did. It seems to me like they did a good job. Also, like I'm not super incentivized to really try to break it because I'm not getting paid for it.
Right.
But yeah, but from a cursory glance, it seems like a pretty solid system. The way the point system, the residency, system. I mean, there's still nothing stopping me from like marrying proper and then him becoming a U.S. citizen and not being really important. So, but yeah, I mean, that's no one's actually gonna do that. But that's just the extreme lengths I would go to for the required, the right amount of compensation to build a super team. But yeah, no, I think the rulebook's solid. I think the rulebook's solid so far. I think the bigger things in my head, like as I said before, is like we need org incentives. There needs to be strong org incentives. There needs to be either team skins, some sort of cosmetics, some in-game, like there needs to be some in-game digital items. I think that's what orgs are looking for, like some sort of share of the of an in-game item that's like either goes towards the prize pool or goes towards orgs. I think personally, I think there should be like a baseline prize pool, and then you're crowdfunding like for champs or whatever, like similar to Valorant, right? Like you pay for the champs bundle, and like that goes to that split goes to directly to orgs in champs, and if you make champs, you get a cut. Like I think it's tiered based on how well you do, but you do get a cut. So even if you're last place at champs, you're getting a pretty significant share. And if you get first place or like one of the upper echelon, you get a lot. You get a significant amount of money from like the champ skin splits that Valorant does. And I'd really like to see Overwatch do the same thing.
With World Cup, they tried something. The amount of money generated wasn't incredible. I think 512K was what.
Yeah, 500K. Yeah.
What teams received. Do you think the level of effort they put into the Overwatch World Cup skins was adequate, or should they go harder for the skins?
Again, I think similar to this year, that was a pilot program, right? Like I'm sure Fernando, the guy that was running it all, learned a lot from it, and they're going to be, as long as they continually improve on that, I think it was a good first step. I mean, understand that like Overwatch World Cup, that was the most money the players have ever gotten.
Right.
If you look at, like, you can go to Wikipedia, you can just look at the ridiculous small sum of money that players got. I think so. USA won the last time, right? I'm not this past time, but the last time they got like 10K total, like
right.
Just nothing. Like that's just not. There's just no money at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Blizzard's done like a much better job of with the skins. Even though you can talk about like the time spent, it's like, okay, hopefully they took whatever they learned from that process and like make it better for the major and for the for champ this year.
For sure. Do you have a particular thing in mind?
Mercy skins.
Mercy.
That's the easiest. Literally, like if you want to maximize the prize pool, you just make mercy skins every time. Screw the other heroes. Just keep making mercy skins, and you'll get viewership. You'll get tons of skin purchases. Like, yeah, mercy skins and mercy related emotes. Whatever it is, just make it mercy related, and print money.
Do you have a gut feeling what's better, like one dedicated skin, like they did with the, what's it called, like the Atlantic Lucio skin or whatever that they put out? They also had a mercy skin, way back when, right? Or would it be better to go more shotgun approach, maybe with the same effort that a good skin takes, just go gun skins and scatter it a little bit more?
So I think for year one, there's like there's like more realistic things that people could, or that I think are more realistic for Overwatch to implement. Like I think like a champs bundle, like 25% to team, something like that. Like titles are easy, like easy lift, right? Like it's just come up with a type a name into the like, and then print the title.
Yeah.
Banners I think is easy. I think maybe signatures, like icons, or like an icon of the either the team logo or the player's signature. I don't know what, but that should be relatively easy to do, since it's not like a fully animate. Like I think skins is probably the hardest thing to do, right? So I think probably like asking for anything more than one skin is like ridiculous. Like a lot of time invested in, and if you're team 4, you're probably like, okay, well, we don't even know how good OWCS is going to be. Like you probably want to put don't want to put too many resources, like, or art resources into skins, but like I think one skin's reasonable. And then maybe a small number of select weapons. I don't know. Charms, right? But actually charms might be, because charms have to work on every single
gun
hero in the game. So that's probably a lot. So maybe like a select weapon, like how they like golden skins, like maybe like a silver. I don't know what color skin, but like some sort of like specific, like, oh, this is like a mercy staff that's a different color, or like I think that could be cool. I don't know if that's something they've ever done. Do they even have exclusive weapon skins like that for Mythics? Do they for Overwatch?
For Mythics specifically, the gun skins, or
just in general? I mean, I'm saying, is there any instance where there's just like, say, soldier has a specific like gun, and it's just a soldier gun that's different? Not.
Yes, like they recently put those out, right? Like, isn't that the new?
I don't know. I'm like the worst when it comes to Overwatch cosmetics. Like I'm like
Right.
the least. Like I haven't bought a skin. I haven't bought a skin since loot boxes were a thing. Like, and even before then, like I've bought a skin like 5 years, I would say. So like
Right.
I'm very far removed from like what
Yeah, it's just
what
recently that they came out with these, I think, 3 gun skins, right? For Reinhardt,
Okay.
Mercy, and I forget who the third one
Oh,
was.
that's great. I mean, then there's precedence, right? So like it's not
Right.
like a completely new thing. So like yeah, a small number of select weapons that like because similar to Valorant where like Valorant's like it's a primary. So like either it's always been a Vandal or a Phantom and a
Right.
knife, right? So similarly, you can I don't know, tracer pistols, right? Like something popular,
Right.
Genji shurikens, like something, like something. Do go in your database, see like who had like the highest percentage of most playtime hero, and then choose one of those skins. Um, yeah, I mean maybe if you want to keep it like balanced, like have one tank skin, one DPS skin, one support skin, or one support gun skin. So there's something for everyone in every role, as an example. And I think those are like lesser lift than like charms, right? Where you have to
Yep.
make it work on the whole cast of heroes. It's like, okay, you just have to, lower lift things that I think, I'm not an artist, right? Like I don't work at Blizzard, but like to me, these are things that seem like realistic options for a year one.
Yeah, no.
And I would backload this to champs, like to give them more runway. Because I think the bigger like the bundle should be like for champs, and you can just crowdfund like the major, with something more simple.
Sure. I guess as a last topic, because half of your boys were picked up, I thought I
Yeah.
had to ask, right? So,
Mhm.
Kasaurus had the hardest job in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I got the only bag of money known in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
Who wants some of this money?
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you know? He landed on half your team.
Yeah.
And of course, like for viewers that might not be aware, they signed someone, Merit and RuPaul
Yep.
from the Mayhem. Initial thoughts, isn't that not just the worst Mayhem roster?
The what?
The new Toronto roster is not just not worst Mayhem.
A worse mayhem? Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think we have to wait, but like on paper, yeah. I mean, I think Chorong's better than Vega. Vega has a lot to prove. He's gonna be a rookie. I think they picked up the best available options at the non-import slots, based on their team build for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worse than the Mayhem roster on paper. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an unfair question because, of course, the ruler
Yeah,
now is the import rules, not the Overwatch
yeah,
League
yeah,
rules, right? So,
yeah.
not to be taken literally, but like in a comparative sense,
Right.
Chorong not being there is a downgrade in most
Yeah,
cases for sure, and then Checkmate as well, right? I would
yeah.
argue.
Checkmate
Um,
was up there last year.
even though I would say Checkmate and Sugar Free, I mean, reasonably close together, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, I think Chorong being a top two, top one, depending on who you ask, like main support is, Vega. Vega is like a question mark for me. I don't know where, like, he's good. I just don't know where his actual ranking is because I haven't seen him play matches against. I mean, Param, but like I don't even he didn't really impress during Param from what I saw last year. That was the only time I saw him play against Owl teams.
imagine a situation where Kasaurus gets another offer somewhere else, and the
Mhm.
Toronto Defiant are looking for a new GM, and they land on you. Would you build that
Yeah.
same team?
No, I said on stream I'd build. I mean, what I want to build and what is possible are two different things, right? But like ideal, like I get everything I want. I think it should have been someone proper,
Mhm.
and I have Seeker as hit scan, and then same backline. I think that's what I would have done. Um, but I think this roster is probably like the second strongest possible after that. Um, yeah, but I think Ham is a must, and I think the rumored roster before, so Ham was a late addition to this roster.
Okay.
I think the rumor I heard was it was supposed to be proper merit,
Mm-hmm.
and then Kluge was the tank. Um, and then for some, I think things fell through with proper. I don't know how they. I would love to hear from like either Proper or Kasaurus or someone like how or not someone the player, but someone at Defiant, like how that, because from what I heard for like months or like at least a month leading up to the when it ended up being the roster was like they had Proper on like as a lock, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. So I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened. But knowing they had Proper, I would have been like, hey, like we have Ham, we have we have someone, we have Proper, and then we fill in the rest. But that's like the two best import I could think of. A flex DPS import and a hyperflex main tank, and we'll fill in the rest with the best of NA, which they did. So yeah, mine would just be Seeker and Proper instead of Sugar Free and Merit.
Do you think there's an argument for operability of like Merit and someone as players in a hybrid roster that could be preferential over others?
Wait, over Proper or over?
Yeah,
what?
Proper maybe not, but like other flex DPS that you could slot in that probably for the most part only played in all Korean lineups.
Yeah, no, I think if you can't get Proper, I mean, Lit maybe over Merit. It depends on what you need, like, because I think Merit he's better at the hard hit scans, but like Lip has slightly more flexibility, I would say. But Merit's like really, really like I think he's the best hard hit scan in the world. So it's hard.
I feel like when you're throwing these names out there, it's a very Albert pick because it feels like you have a lower threshold of warding off assholes. Like you're fine taking a player that has maybe a little bit of a problematic not problematic, but spicy aura that could actually cause a ruckus in your team, right?
I mean, I think it's Ham. I mean, I think Ham, like, someone is like the perfect like tank, like teammate, everything. Like he never gets tilted. He's always happy. He's always like. So I think as long as you have him on the team, like, what's that other guy gonna get mad? Like, like you literally can't. I could never get mad at someone like ever. Like there's nothing to be mad at him for. He's tries his hardest in scrims. He tries his hardest in a match. He does his silly celebrations. He does like like he's energized. Like he's like the perfect teammate and the best at the same time, the best player in his role. Like he's just a unicorn like that. And I think having him like like you can have one or you have like another toxic. You can have one toxic player on the team, like not a problem. Like I don't know what is there to be toxic about. You're playing with the best tank in the world, like
true.
Yeah.
So to be fair, I feel like I guess Proper didn't have that firepower last year, but we saw what happens to main supports that aren't up to snuff and are from North America, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I still think you have to roll the dice on talent. You have to take the gamble on talent every time. And deal and just try to make it work. I think going the opposite way and just like limiting yourself on the amount of talent you can get because you're not sure if it'll work out is always the suboptimal decision.
Sure.
Because you can always, if it doesn't work, you can always change. But you'll never see if you never try, you'll never be able to get the max talent available. Like maximize the talent on your initial roster. But you can always downgrade talent. Downgrading talent is the easiest part. You can just you're not, whoever it is, like you're not worth the headache. Get someone worse and see if the team performs. You can always do that at any point. Why do it in the beginning when you're, before you even know that's the case? And you can always trade that player.
Right.
If they're so good, you can trade that player for a lesser talent. Like, and the other team will thank you for it. They're like, okay, well, I'm fleecing you. Like I can't,
Yeah. No fair. Do you think there's a possibility that someone might be one of the only players in the world that could have, and I'm not sure, I'm not really speaking of knowing the numbers or whatever, but received a salary upgrade by going to Toronto?
I have no idea what Ham's getting paid. but he was on a I think he close. He had a decent second year salary.
Okay.
With us. Yeah. So I think it'd be close. I assume he got close or some. I mean, but then you add in Toronto taxes. Like I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I don't. Canada taxes are crazy because I think a lot of people underestimate like you take home a lot of money when you play for Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Hydron made more on paper on Toronto, but he took home less, is what he told me. Like significantly less, even though he didn't get paid as much on like salary wise on Florida his first year, but he took home a lot more because there's no state tax, and he's he doesn't have to pay for rent, like that's just straight money to the bank. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also a fair lens to always look at Toronto's spending comparison to other orgs, where they just had to offer more because of taxes. Right?
Well, I don't think the players realized because they offer more and they still earn less. So it's like I don't even think they should offer more, honestly. But yeah it's you're getting paid in fake money and you get taxed. So yeah,
yeah,
you get taxed heavily.
Yeah,
so,
I guess if you have never paid taxes in your life before, I guess that's an easy mistake to make. I'd hope the agent would consider that, but
I think a lot of players don't have agent. I don't think Ham has an agent. I don't think Merritt has an agent. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they might have one now, but like at least when from what because Merritt I never talked to an agent when we transferred his contract, and Ham was just a buyout from Shanghai Academy. Yeah.
All right. So before we get out of here, it has not gone unnoticed. I actually used it up a couple of times. That you have been content creating. So, how how regularly are you doing that? And is there any schedule that you could communicate to viewers and that you follow?
I don't know. I think I'm in this tough spot where I'm like I'm not sure because sometimes like playing ranked all day is like that's not really content creation. That's just like I'm playing ranked, and
right.
I like I'm like pretty honest and like straightforward with myself. So it's like there's plenty of other people you would watch if you wanted to watch like gameplay, like players that you could watch that play my role or play other roles that are probably more exciting. So I don't know. I don't really think I get all that much out of streaming ranked, and also for my mental, it probably makes more sense for me to stream that offline. But yeah, so I'm not sure at this point. I think right now it's like very up in the air because I'm in between jobs. I'm interviewing at places, but it's
in
there's
esports?
nothing. Some I mean a few. I'd prefer to stay in esports because I've been doing in the industry for like almost 6 years, and I think anything else would be a pivot, and I might have to start over essentially, from like ground zero, which is I prefer not to. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe esports is a sunk cost. We'll have to find. That's for me to find out, right? That's for me to find out. But yeah, while I'm applying and like while there's not that many esports jobs, I think it's really hard. Especially like the higher you climb, in esports, the harder, the less. I'm like overqualified for many positions and positions that like I probably wouldn't be interested in. And I'm underqualified for other positions that are not directly,
yes.
I'm in a very like I had a very I won niche position. I was like one of the lucky few to like there's probably like some job positions similar to like mine, probably like less than 100 in the world. Like probably maybe 100's a lot. Like maybe it's 50. Like I don't know. Cuz I'm talking like tier 1 org with like, with the like it's not easy finding a new like president or like GM job, especially in this market. It makes it worse. So yeah, while I'm between finding jobs and applying for them, I've just been streaming every now and then. But I think people and the viewership shows that like when I talk about like news or when I break down stuff, it seems much more interesting to people, or people want to watch it more. So just trying to figure out ways to do that more, or like do that on a consistent basis. Yeah, we'll see. I still need to, in my head. I still gotta. There's a ton of stuff on my plate. So like, just so everyone knows, like I had to move out of Florida because there's no reason for me to Florida anymore. The Florida's not even a hub for esports jobs. You know, it was just Misfits. It was just Mayhem here. So I gotta move out. I gotta sell my condo. I gotta sell my car, and move back home in the interim. So like that's what's on my plate for like, early March. So then after that, like I'll have a better idea. Hopefully I have a job by then, and then maybe I don't stream. Also, like streaming in first quarter is actually really bad for ad revenue. There's like zero, because like the ad dollars were crazy like leading up the end of the year. But I think the ad dollars, like that's why you're watching ads on Twitch or whatever. But like it's not paying the creators much in the first quarter, I would say, or at least definitely not January, February, because the new ad deals are being negotiated still.
Yeah.
So yeah, but long answer to an easy question. But yeah, the answer is like I don't have a schedule, and I don't feel comfortable committing to one. But if I figure out a way to do it daily, and having it like more, like just recap, like I don't know, like do you want me to Overwatch TMZ? Like I don't know, like well, we have to figure it out. I'm happy to talk about Overwatch. I'm happy to talk about esports as a whole. Maybe it becomes like an office hour stream. Like maybe it's like, because I've had a lot of college students like contact me and ask me on like my journey, like what I would recommend. Which is an interesting time to ask me about that now, when like I'm laid off and like it's a terrible time to try to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe stuff like that, like maybe resume reviews, something that I need to figure out some sort of program where it's not the same as like other Overwatch, like content creators. And I need to find my niche, and I think streaming ranked is probably not the best use of my time, on stream at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I much prefer talking about Overwatch. I much prefer, like podcasts, like discussing stuff. I could do that all day. But it's just a matter of finding a vehicle and like a format for that makes sense on Twitch and for my platform. So yeah, work in progress.
Sure.
Work in progress.
Then we also wish you, of course, the best of luck with the interviews, and thank you for the interview.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, man.